Welcome to the Beautiful Step Podcast,
where we
run,
stomp,
tiptoe,
and tango into the confusing
but beautiful
world of togetherness. We are your hosts, Kris
and Charity.
Now, let's go make our together even better. We are back. I had to use the restroom, and I get some coffee, and we should do part 2 of what we just did. What do you think?
Okay.
You don't want to?
Let's do it.
That's, you raised some pretty controversial things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ownership and all these.
Yeah. I'm sure, there's a lot of men I pissed off. Maybe women. Actually, a lot of women, too. Mm-hmm.
You think so?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But everyone gets to make their own decisions.
Everyone gets to make their own decisions.
Just because I think something doesn't mean anyone else should think it.
Doesn't mean it's right.
Yeah. Do whatever, think whatever you want.
I'm the only one who thinks like me.
That's part of being a grown-ass adult.
I love it. Everybody's
got to answer for their own opinions.
And the thing about it is again, in today's society, everybody's talking about if we could just sit down and talk. Mm-hmm. If we could just kind of, and if you're easily offended, you're never going to get there. And it rarely happens because people just get wrapped around the axle, or they get so idealistic with these ideologies that they're so committed to and owning that it really does take away from their learning, right? And that's kind of the idea that I was trying to talk about, when I was like, no one thinks like me. And I know I have ideologies that some I really love and have really helped me, but some of them are blinding me and need to be corrected. A lot of that. So we were talking about, you were like challenging me, like, would you go back and change your name, or would you go back and not get married? Or why do you think we got married very, very young? Why did we get married so young? Well, you needed to have sex with me. You needed.
But actually, that is.
However, that would be.
That is like. The thing is, that is the reason a lot of people get married young, or just get married when they're in that setting, because premarital sex is off the table. And it's off the table in a way.
Well, babe, I would say that it's not just sort of institutionalized religion. You look at movies, and you'll have this thing. I want to say it was Pam and Jim in The Office, where they go to, I think it was like, that's what it was. Everyone was showing up for the wedding weekend in the hotel, and Jim's like, Pam won't be having a drink because, and then he stops, and then it goes into this thing of like, why won't she have a drink? Why won't she have a drink? Because she was pregnant. And he didn't want,
the grandma was super mad.
And so it's that thing. And there was no talk about this woman being religious or anything. I think you just have this, in a large way, you do have a cultural construct.
Yes, certainly. I don't know that it's there necessarily anymore, but older generations, for sure.
Yeah.
And then people who would view it as a moral thing would say that that's off the table.
Of course. And you still have rhetoric that sounds like they're shacking up, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Which, it is amazing the level of weight that this carries.
Of course, the premarital sex thing, yeah.
Yeah, it carries.
Well, because let's just take that out of a religious world and put it into a cultural construct, right? And a guy, right, with another cultural construct, sort of like, if you build these things, he's not going to shack up in a way, because you're not taking responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, there's this thing.
You mean like just living together without being married? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. It's like,
you're not responsible enough?
Well, you're not really like manning up or owning up to what's really going on. You should probably get married and take on, those types of responsibility. It's called adulting, dude. You know what I mean? So it doesn't necessarily have to be religious. There's a lot of other, sort of systems at play here.
But that's like living together. I mean, I still think the whole, like, in the religious construct of having to be married to have sex drives a lot of people to get married.
Yes, absolutely. And 100%.
We did, you have married, like, actually performed the ceremony for, I can't even count how many people over the years. And we have done premarital counseling for hordes of couples.
Which is kind of, that gave birth to this podcast in a way.
Yeah.
Because we've just worked with so many people.
Yeah.
And we've learned a lot.
Yes.
Through working with a lot of people. And we learn a lot by just doing the podcast.
Yeah.
So it's fun. But anyway.
Yeah. So this idea, though, that, like, you're, somehow within this society, if you're having sex, it's linking you together and you're becoming one flesh.
Sure.
And in order for you to be one flesh, you really do need to kind of, like, own each other, which is what the marriage vows are saying. Like, I'm with you forever. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine.
Yeah,
all
it's
that
thing
of
of like, man, if you're big enough to share your body, you should be big enough to share your bank. You know what I mean? You're big enough to share.
I've never heard this.
Oh, that. I used to do that to guys all the time. I'd be
Really?
like, yo, man, you can share your body and everything, but you're not going to share responsibility. You're not going to, you're not going to, you can man up in the bedroom, but you can't man up at work or, whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
It's that whole thing of like, man, if you can be intimate enough to share your body, you should be intimate enough to share your life.
Yeah.
And I think there's some real beauty to that. There's some real wisdom to that.
For sure. Yeah. But I wonder if there is a reason why it carries such a heavy weight. Like, I think about it and I'm like, it's one of the things that we drilled in our kids. Like, don't be having premarital sex and like all that stuff. And then as you raise kids, you realize, like, and as I was raised, like, we did all the purity rings and all that kind of stuff.
It's a big deal.
Like, yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And what I realize now is, like, most everyone I knew was having sex. They just said that they weren't.
Right.
Or they were doing what everyone else in the world considers sex, but they would say is not because it wasn't some sort of penile penetration. Like, and it's not
At least the penile wasn't penetrating the right orifice. Whatever.
It's not just premarital, it's like extramarital. Like, what I realized much later in life was that I was the idiot who actually thought what everyone was saying they were doing, which is not really the case. Very few people are actually not having any sort of sexual thing. And then I always think it's funny when people say, like, he's that guy that has no interest in sex. And I'm always like, that means he's getting it somewhere else or is not attracted to that gender or is not, there's something else going on there.
Right.
Because we're sexual beings. And I think that's the thing I was always, and we've talked about this before on a podcast, like, but let's just acknowledge that that's a natural phenomenon that people want to have sex. And
it's beautiful.
But it carries so much weight to not have premarital sex that it's even something that comes up amongst moms in the weirdest ways. As your kids get older, it's like people are asking about how your kids are doing. And you're like, they're good. They have a girlfriend, but they're not living together. Or they're, and which is so weird because to think, like, in a normal context, I don't think moms would talk about the sex life of their children.
Yeah, it's like, you're kind of like, what are they, TMI or whatever, the whole thing of like, why are you discussing your kid's sex life with me right now?
But it's in that context, it is the standard of if you're okay or not okay.
Well, here's the thing. This is the thing that I would like to say is if we're talking about ownership, it's another iteration of the autonomy, the lack of autonomy, the lack of individuality, that whole thing of like, my kid really is just a reflection of me.
Yeah.
And
I was so bad about that.
Which, no. Yeah, I know, me too. Which we would have been, I think, a lot more relieved if we would have taken, you got to take ownership of your kid in a way. But you should never take ownership of your kid, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Especially as they age. They are not you.
They are not you.
And they get to make their own choices.
Right. And so I guess just the point that, you were bringing up about this whole idea of women, slavery, ownership, can't really get, ahead in society or any of these things. If you, I think that is a a little evidence of we still deal with these ownership issues.
Yes.
We still play within this whole ownership thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty self-evidencing with the way that we like apologize.
Yeah.
You know, for our kids or for our wife's actions or for, it's because it is a reflection on me because I own it, man.
Yeah.
Like it is me and it's not you.
Right.
Right?
Right. But when people can't be honest and when you don't let them, when they are just a reflection, then just like the situation we were talking about before, where it's like the wife loses all ability to make her own decisions or make her own money or make her own, it's the same thing where your kids might be going along with this and like giving you lip service, shining it on.
Right.
But hey, they're probably still having sex. And they're probably still, because they're sexual beings. And so let's just admit that like that culture of like, I'm trying to control everyone.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. They'll actually do the opposite. It's just you won't know about it. They'll get really good at hiding, which is actually the more scary issue, the lying, and that's the more scary issue. But I just think it's so weird because it does drive, I think, for our generation, this weight of being afraid of premarital sex and those kind of things like that being off the table caused a lot of us to get married really young.
Oh, yeah.
And what's interesting about that is a lot of our friends are now divorced, right? Which, and women my age, about 50, are getting divorced now after really long marriages.
Right.
And most of them could give a shit about getting married again. They have no interest in that, or at least quite a few of them. It's like, been there, done that. I don't really see the need for that or whatever else. But we have found that over the years, staying married is like this idol everybody worships. Like it's the ultimate thing that you can do is to stay married. Even if you're miserable, even if both of you are miserable and it's a terrible relationship. Yeah. Staying married somehow makes you godly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, God hates divorce, you know, and, you have to have certain criteria that you have to meet in order to even be justified in, getting a divorce, right? Yeah. And, I think all of it, again, all of this, if we were to relate this, and, hey, you don't have to relate it the way we're trying to relate it, but if you were to relate this as, from a guy's perspective, as ownership, like I'm really, like, owning, I don't know if it's owning the marriage, owning you, but there is this thing of, I can't really be honest, be Kris, be outward, be open without Charity and all of my kids being a reflection of who I am. Like, these are, like, if I'm sitting here, you're screwing up, I'm a screw up.
Right.
Right? It's that whole, like, do I really own you that much? Or is there that much, like, is there that little autonomy? Yeah. And so I guess what I'm getting at is this, is I found in my religious studies, Santi Diva, who is, he's a yogi, but he came out with some really crazy cool ideas. And one of his ideas is ownership is fear. And it's like, ownership is fear. And I started to think about that. And I started to sort of relate it to the way that my brain works and the things that I would say about myself or my family or, the apologies that I make. And I'm going, why am I doing this? It's really, a lot of this comes from fear. And it comes from fear of the way people see me. Yeah. It comes from fear of me not, me letting people down. It comes from a fear of, well, I mean, you see where I'm going with this, right? And so the sort of antidote, I guess, would be, I mean, if you talk to a really bodhisattva, like a really awakened, like, Buddhist, at the end of their day, I think I've said this before, they will end up with no name, no possessions, and really nothing. Like that's kind of nirvana, like the nothingness thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that if you look at ownership as fear, you could say something like, the less I own, the more sort of relieved and at peace and less things I have to worry about. Right? For instance, I have a 1997 Chevy that I drive that is like really not worth owning. It's, it's pretty beat. And I love that truck because I can do whatever I want to it. It doesn't matter. Like I can park it between two cars right next to, like right in there. Like I can hit the doors and everything. Like I can barrel through the woods and that thing, And, Christ does a lot of this too, in that, he's in the Beatitudes, he says, blessed are the poor in spirit. Well, to be poor means you have no possessions.
Right.
Right? And to be poor means even the things that you do have are very, like, who gives a shit about these? And I think what it, between a lot of religious sort of disciplines, when you get that message, ownership is fear, blessed are the poor in spirit, you start to realize, okay, maybe ownership, maybe owning it isn't the end game here.
Yeah.
And maybe what I do have is really good.
Yeah.
It's not, it's so different. Me driving my 1997 Chevy down the highway to my cabin. I can't even imagine driving a 22, Lamborghini or something. I'd be so scared to drive that thing. I wouldn't want to get it scratched. I wouldn't want to bring it through the mud. I wouldn't want to get it dirty. I wouldn't, it's fear. And I guess I think to me, that's just such a liberating point. And it takes such humility and sort of generosity, I think, to be able to have that mindset.
So how does that relate to relationships? How do you view, like, does that mean you don't get married because that's a sense of, like...
Yeah, I think it does mean you don't jump into marriage. You know what I mean? Seriously. Marriage, in so many cases, is the 2022 Lamborghini. It's the whole thing of like, dude, too much for you right now. Like the last thing you need right now is this type of ownership in your life. This, like, especially in so many of these constructs that we live in.
For sure, if you're just doing it to have sex.
Well, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's like this blinding push to have sex will make you do some crazy shit.
Yeah.
like take on something that you have no business taking on right now.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I think in a way, yes, you shouldn't get married.
Yeah. If the reasons are because you need to own, like if they're based in fear.
Yes. And I think that's, I mean, I know this is kind of a convoluted thought, but this is the way that I think. And I think that it has, some merit to it, where it's like, ownership is fear. If you relate it to a relationship, blessed are the poor in spirit. I think to myself, the things, man, that you value right now at an early age or no real relationship experience are not the things you're going to value in 10 years.
Yeah.
And the things that, you're thinking, why would you want to go out and get a trophy husband?
I wouldn't. I have a trophy husband.
Why would a person want to go out and get a trophy wife? Why would a person want to go out and get a trophy husband? It's because they're not poor in spirit. Think about it. It's because they don't understand the concept that ownership is fear. It's because I think that I would much rather have a wife whom I really trusted than a wife who was super hot that I didn't.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's that whole values thing.
Right. The purpose you're talking about, the purpose of actually joining in that union.
Right.
Yeah. Don't you think it's kind of odd? I've always thought it was odd. I mean, we used to be ordained.
Yeah.
We were ordained through church, and we ordained people.
Sure.
Because you can just do that in churches. You can just ordain people.
Yep.
And don't you think it's weird that I've always been confused by this concept that ordained people in America can perform marriages, which are legally binding contracts.
Sure.
And you could be a random Joe Schmo as long as somebody deemed you ordained. And now you can even get it online. But then the only other people that can do that in this society are judges, legal judges.
Right.
And it's
Big
the same.
difference.
It's the same binding thing. But what's really interesting to me is that the judge can grant the divorce and must grant the divorce if you decide to end that union. But the ordained person in a church does not grant the divorce.
Somehow it doesn't have the power.
Doesn't have the power. So then you go like, I think that begs the question of what you're talking about. Like, is somewhere in there, can you see a promotion of ownership?
Right.
Within the construct, because you're like, well, why can this one so quickly decide you should get married and stay married and all of this stuff?
So much so that, we're not going to issue a divorce.
Yes.
And if you do get a divorce, you've entered into like Wednesday night. Like you got to go to the divorce care thing. Like this is you know what I mean? Like you're a different person. And
or you get banned from the church altogether or whatever. But there's a shame, which is a lot of people then don't get divorced because of the shame of it or whatever else. But yet.
Which proves my point that ownership is fear.
Yeah. So we're not saying marriage is a bad thing.
No.
We're just saying like it should actually be considered from the standpoint of what it is, which is a legal contract.
Yes.
And a vow you make to each other, for sure. But that vow could be made to each other with or without the legal contract, I could say to you.
Not in that institution, and not in most religious institutions. Right. They will not say, hey, you guys are married in spirit.
Right.
Therefore, you're married. Mm-hmm. It's horseshit in most organized religions.
Right. Yeah. For sure. But I would say, like, my commitment to you now goes beyond marriage.
Right.
And I think that this is the thing that we have talked about many, many times.
Sure.
Is that we went into marriage needing each other.
Right.
We needed each other to be able to have sex. We needed each other to be able to have children. We needed each other to be able to survive financially.
We needed each other to be able to function in that world.
We needed each other to be able to feel right before God.
Yep.
We need like all of those things.
Yeah.
And then you go into life and you're married and you're raising kids and you
can I say just right there, like how much of that thing do you think, how much of that mindset was fear? Like there was just, because ownership as fear is not just, how much stuff I own, how much stuff, do I have to worry about? But it is that whole thing of like, I have to own it because I don't want to lose it.
Yes.
Like I'm right there. If I don't own this, it's going to go away.
Yes. But I think that's huge. I mean, I think for so many years, but I also see the benefit of that in the sense that like it saved us from getting divorced probably quite a few times in the 28 years we've been married. And which I'm glad about now because I'm really happy.
Yes.
But the fear stopped me from ending it short. Right. A lot of times. Right. You too. So we have laughed a lot of times about we needed each other through the different stages of our marriage, really. Like you need each other when you're raising young kids because you just feel like you're exhausted all the time and like you need help and like, and then you have stages where you need each other financially. You actually couldn't make it on your own financially. And then you need each other for these other things to feel right in society and to have the right friends and to, you need each other for all these things, to look a certain way, be a certain way, feel a certain way.
Yeah.
So many of my friends actually won't get a divorce because they feel like they'd be out of the will of God.
They
might hate their husband, but they'll stay in it because of the will of God. So my point is that we've gotten to the point where like we've assessed that and said, well, we don't need each other anymore. We both could financially be sustained on our own. We don't have children to raise anymore. We don't need each other that way. Like there's all these things now that we no longer need each other, but we just want each other.
Right.
We just like each other. And that's why we stay married now, as opposed to we stay married now because we need to.
Right.
Or because we would be wrong if we weren't.
Right.
Which I will say, if your point is ownership is fear.
Right.
It has been very liberating to be like, at any point, we could take or leave this. But we choose not to because we really like each other.
Right.
And we love each other and we want to be together.
Right.
That brings in a different dynamic.
Oh, God.
Then you have to stay in it because you have no other choice.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And that, I think, again,
Yeah.
you can't help but look at, the messages, sort of hidden rules, in our social constructs in America, in our religious constructs in America, in our economic constructs in America, promoting ownership, promoting ownership, promoting ownership, promoting ownership.
You get a tax break by being married.
I know. And that's the thing where I'm like, there's good things about it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also so much of your life is lived in fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, we got suicide rates and anxiety and all of, gung, 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 gung. And it's like, well, it's because we're all driving a fucking 2022 Lamborghini and don't have no business doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, seriously.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot there where it's just a fun thought to think, what if I related so much of this to ownership, right? And it's like, to me, the less ownership, the more generous I can be.
Yeah.
Less ownership, the less worried I am about losing these certain things.
Which I think the practical tool there is not that you go out and get divorced so that you can prove you don't have ownership.
Or be scared of being married. That's not the other thing either.
That's not the point. The point is that you can release the need or the mandate that someone else is a reflection of you. You need them to function, whether it be your kids or your spouse or whoever. If you can release that, then you actually get to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I the whole thing is, for me, one of the big moves in my brain was, what if I were proud of my life simply because it's mine, What if I were proud of my kids, Not because I'm owning all these institutional mindsets, but just because
they're your kids and they're awesome and you love them. And they don't need to perform a certain way or not have premarital sex or any of those other things to make me proud that they're my kids.
Right. And I think that is that's the upside of ownership, Because ownership is fear, right? But I think we're talking about owning like the wrong stuff, man. Like, why are you
ownership
owning
can
that,
also
man?
be love. It can also, it's just fear is one of the elements that comes with ownership. I think maybe is how we should say it.
Yeah, I like that.
Because fear, or love also comes with ownership. And that sense of endowment and, adoration and care and nurture also comes with ownership.
Yeah. One of the thoughts about God that still really works for me, and I hope it works for other people too. It's like, why would God love me? Why would God love me? And it's like, because you're his or you're hers, or however you want to see it.
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it works. And so I think that's like sort of the beautiful side of ownership.
Yeah.
That, man, you did a thing. I remember one time you told a story about, loving your kids. And you had this vivid picture of being on a snow hill. And I think it was Cole. And he, he's having the best time ever. And he looks at you and you reach out your hands and you put them on his cheeks and you take your thumbs and you like wipe like a whole gallon of snot off of his face. And, you know, you got the snot running down your hands, and you're like, let me see that beautiful face, you know? He's your son. And that's the beautiful side of, I think, ownership. And that's the point that, you know, I guess I want to, in this moment I'm learning, you know, but I want to be able to say, like, man, what are the things that I've been owning, taking responsibility for, that are just promoting fear in my life?
Mm.
You know, what are those things that, like, I gotta drop that.
Yeah, that's really good.
I want to drive my 97, man. I don't want to drive the Lamborghini anymore. It's too much.
Yeah. And you get that choice. You can look at it different.
Yeah.
You can choose not to have fear about something by just letting go of simple mindsets.
Yeah.
Standards that shouldn't exist.
Yeah.
You know,
you look at that construct and tell yourself, is this promoting fear, man?
Yeah.
Or is this something that's really life-giving?
Is it fear or love? And there is that scripture,
Yeah,
like,
love.
perfect love drives out fear.
Yeah.
And that's a good mantra. Like,
Yeah.
okay, is this promoting fear, or is this promoting like a real sense of want and love, and you know, and I can just quickly make the decision to view it different and to let that go, and to realize, like, oh, I'm not in this marriage because I need to, or I'm not in this relationship because I need to, or even if I am, even if there's elements of it that I need,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be in fear that it's going to go away. I'm going to choose to see that this brings tons of benefit and love to my life, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to abide and live by that.
Yeah, I love it. And I would say I know I am so much more confident in your love for me
Yeah.
now
Yes.
than I've ever been. And yet, you're like, you know, I could kind of take or leave this. I mean, in a way.
Well, we're both like, and I feel the
Exactly.
same way. I feel more confident in your love for me, but I also know that, like, we're both so open-handed about it now.
Yeah, and you're like,
It doesn't make or break
maybe
us.
you're choosing me for me now rather than being like the fear of this institution.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is important.
It's
so
a
anyway,
beautiful
these are just
thing.
things we're just thinking
Just
about.
riffing today.
Yeah.
I love it.
All right.
Ownership is fear.
Elements of ownership. can bring
I
fear.
like that.
Yeah.
Elements of ownership. Much of ownership is fear, and you got to let some things go.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love you.
Love
baby.
you.
Wait, babe, wait. How do we end this?
By saying thank you.
Okay, you guys are awesome. Thank you. There's nothing more encouraging than you hitting that like button and commenting.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And I know there's more. You have a list. Might as well go down the list.
Right. Okay. Watch the video of this podcast on our Beautiful Step YouTube channel or on our website, where you can actually download transcripts and show notes of the episode. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
If today's episode made your together even better, tell someone
Okay. Now,
right now.
today,
Okay?
you can take one step
It's just one step.
toward the beautiful relationship you want in your life.
You got this.